let's be more focusing on consistency over the intensity, and like even stopping short of failure. I'm totally okay with that as long as people are training with progressive overload. And one of the phrases I use for a lot of my coaching students is we want to keep it below red line. Like, like don't have to empty the tank every time. And I say, like, but one thing that you mentioned there, Nick, that I really want to unpack, you said not training to failure. And I want to really unpack that, because this is a big topic in the fitness industry, especially like in the YouTube fitness. Like some people are saying, oh, you got to train to failure. Other people are saying, no, we want to have reps in reserve and everything in between. And I know like even Mike Mentzer's old videos, like they're starting to be recirculated and gotten like a lot of popularity. And I have people reaching out to me and saying, why do you think of, the one set to failure method that Mike Mentzer preached and all this? So what's your philosophy about this whole training to failure, and like how do you implement it for yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to be honest, I'm completely non-dogmatic about it. I basically take it for the benefits it offers and the benefits it doesn't offer, and I rotate between failure and not failure. Going to failure is great, but nothing works forever. So if you go to failure a lot, your nervous system is going to hit a point where it can't recover from that. And then your benefit is to not go to failure and focus more on training volume. So generally the approach I take is taking advantage of that, where if I'm doing a specific training program where I want to build strength, what I'll do is I'll start with a volume-based program. So I'm actually ramping up the volume, where I'm doing more sets with less rest periods in between. Like, for example, week 1, I'll do 3 sets with 2 minutes rest. Week 2, 4 sets with 1.5 minutes rest. Week 3, 5 sets with 1 minute rest. So it's gradually amping up the volume. Kind of like when you're a car going up a hill, you got the pedal floored. By the time you hit the top of the hill, go over the other side, your body is still kind of catching up to that volume and will be, increasing its recovery capabilities. When you come over the other side, then, for example, I'll go to 3 sets with 3 minutes rest, and your strength levels just shoot through the roof. And that's when you push to failure. So with the volume training, you don't push to failure. With the intensity strength training, you do push, well, not at to failure, but very close to failure. With real strength training, you actually don't want to push to failure either, because that, again, tweaks the nervous system too much. Basically, to answer your question, yes and no, and yes and no. And it depends. And there's so many different variables. It's like training to failure works, and not training to failure also works.
Right.
So why limit yourself to just one when they both work? And they both have their benefits, and they both have their advantages and disadvantages. So you can actually use them to your advantage to progress almost continuously. So,
and let's define, like, what do you define failure as? Because like some people have it where they can't move the weight at all. The way I usually recommend or say failure is the point where you can't do another repetition by yourself with good form. Like once your form starts to break down, that's where I classify it as failure. And like, depending when I'm coaching people, like sometimes it's safe to go beyond failure. For example, let's say we're doing a bicep curl, and you get to the point where I can't do another strict curl, but I can use a little bit of momentum, a little bit of swing or cheat, and probably complete a couple of cheat reps and still get the negative. That technically is beyond failure because your form is broken down. Other exercises is pretty obvious. Like if you're doing a bench press and you're stapled to the bench, okay, yeah, you hit failure.
You hit failure.
But even when you're arching your back and your ass is coming off the bench, and maybe one side's locking out before the other, like technically, like that's failure. If it would red light in a competition in a powerlifting meet, that should be classified as failure. But how do you define it? Like, are you kind of similar, or do you have your own definition?
I mean, just like you said, there's multiple definitions of failure. There's different kinds of failure. And just in general with failure, I would say exactly what you're saying is that, it's like task failure. It's technical failure. It's like you can no longer do a good rep on your own with good form. And then you can kind of, basically most of the sets I like to keep to 1 rep before that. So it's like if I'm doing a bench press, like I hit the top of the bench, I'm like, okay, I know that if I try another rep, I'm going to get pinned to the bench. So I'm not going to do another rep. Whereas, if you maybe wanted to go to beyond failure, like I said, you'd have somebody, a spotter there to help you get past that sticking point so that you could actually progress through that. And, failure is range of motion failure. There's so many different types. It's like failure at the sticking point. That's going to be your technical task failure. but you can get to that, past that sticking point, you can do partials, and you can do partials until you hit failure there. And then you can also do partials and have hit negative failure. You know, it's like the old, what the heck was that? The name of that stuff? It was like 30 years ago. It was like that. It was like a, oh man.
The partial training,
No, it was like a supplement thing where it's like they gave you all these supplements as like a box of supplements.
Oh,
Cybergenics. That's their zero effort training program where basically the goal was, okay, you're going to have somebody, you're going to push until you hit failure or positive. Right. You're going to hold the weight until you hit failure isometrically. And then you're going to have somebody help you with reps until you hit failure on the negative too.
Holy shit.
And this, unless you're on steroids, you're not going to be able to recover from that as a natural trainer, because they wanted you to do this multiple times a week. And it's like, I looked at that program, I'm like, no. And this was in my first year of training. I saw that. I'm like, oh yeah, these commercials, these guys are huge. This works. And and as soon as I saw the program, I'm like, you know, I don't really know much, but I know this is not good.
Right.
You know, it's like, I know I can't, that's just, wow. It's like, it was like 6 days a week training. It was just insane.
Jeez. Yeah. But like generally when I'm coaching people, especially guys in their 40s and beyond, I'm on the more conservative side, focusing on, let's be more focusing on consistency over the intensity, and like even stopping short of failure. I'm totally okay with that as long as people are training with progressive overload. And it's like one of the phrases I use for a lot of my coaching students is we want to keep it below red line. Like, you know, like don't have to empty the tank every time. And I say, like, let's just say you're going like 90%, like you're leaving a little bit in reserve, but then it makes it easier to recover and then come back and push a little heavier. Like maybe, okay, we can add another 5 pounds to a lift the following week and make these little tiny jumps or little incremental progress, but you're always like keeping it below red line. You're never just emptying the tank and draining it fully. I find like that's a way to, it leaves you hungry, wanting more, because like you complete your set saying, you know, I think I could have done more if I really pushed myself, but I'm going to stop today. Right. Leave it here today. And then next week, try a little heavier, like try 5 pounds more.
And you don't feel destroyed and you don't get injured. You know,
that's injury.
Once I hit 40, I started noticing that my recovery was getting a little worse. So I switched from 4-day a week to 3-day a week. And that's, so that's been something that I needed to do too, even at the level I'm going. And I actually need to constantly prevent myself from training too hard, because my tendency is to go just nuts and train, you know, really, really hard. So I have to actually say, okay, nope, I know this is not a day to push that to that level. So I do have to actually make sure that I don't push myself too hard, because I do have a tendency to do that.